Captain Hantah stood at attention in the cold meeting room. The message on his screen still seemed unreal. Aliens wanted human soldiers to take their tests. "Captain, do you understand what this means?" General Park asked. Her face was serious as she paced the room. "Yes, Mom. The Galactic Coalition has invited Earth to send soldiers to their trials." Han kept his voice steady, but his heart raced. General Park stopped pacing. "This is not just any invitation. In 20 years of knowing about aliens, they have never asked us to join their military tests. They think we are too weak." Han nodded. He knew this well. When humans first met aliens 10 years ago, the other species looked down on them. Humans were not as strong as the massive crag warriors or as fast as the four-armed Vish. To the aliens, humans were fragile and small. "Why now?" Han asked. The general tapped a button on the table. A hologram appeared showing a tall, blue-skinned alien in a decorated uniform. "This is Admiral Ko. He leads the coalition forces. He says they want to see how humans perform on their tests, but I think they want to laugh at us when we fail." Han stared at the alien admiral's face. There was no warmth there, just cold duty. "And you want me to go?" he asked. "I want you to lead our best team and prove them wrong," General Park said. "If we refuse, they will think we are afraid. If we fail badly, they will never respect us." Han took a deep breath. "What are these tests like?" "Hard. Very hard. Made for beings twice our strength, with natural armor or extra limbs." The general's eyes narrowed. No human-like species has ever passed even the first level. "Then why send us at all?" General Park sat down and looked Han straight in the eyes. "Because someday we will need allies in this galaxy. Earth cannot stand alone forever, and respect is earned, Captain." Han thought about this. His 20 years in the Marines had prepared him for many things, but not for being humanity's first impression on alien warriors. "I need a team," he said finally. The general nodded and brought up 5 files on the screen. "Pick 4. The best we have." Han studied the files carefully before pointing to the first one. "Sergeant Kim Ji. Best tactical mind I've ever seen." "Good choice," the general agreed. "Private Lee Sun for tech skills. No system he can't hack. Corporal Yoon for marksmanship, and Private Choi Yun as combat medic." Han looked up. "This is my team." General Park nodded slowly. "They have 2 weeks to prepare. The coalition ship arrives on the 15th. As Han turned to leave, the general called after him. "Captain, you should know. The diplomatic team wanted to send scientists instead. They said soldiers would give the wrong impression." Han smiled slightly. "With all due respect, General, sometimes the right impression is that humans can fight." "Exactly," General Park said with the hint of a smile. "Show them that we might be small, but we are not weak." Back in his quarters, Han looked at the files of his chosen team. None of them had ever met an alien before. Now they would face the most elite warriors in the galaxy. He sent them all the same message: "Pack your gear. Earth needs you for a mission unlike any before. We leave in 2 weeks. The fate of humans standing in the galaxy may depend on what we do next." Then he looked up at the night sky through his window. Among those stars were beings who thought humans were too weak to matter. Captain Hantah was about to prove them wrong. The human ship came to a stop near the massive space station. Captain Hantah and his team stood at the viewing window, staring in awe. The Nexus was huge, at least 10 times bigger than Earth's largest space station. "It's like a floating city," whispered Private Choi Yun, the team's medic. "More like a floating military base," said Sergeant Kim Ji, always thinking about tactics. Captain Han nodded. "Remember, we are the first human team to ever set foot here. Every move we make represents Earth." Their small ship docked with a soft bump. The team gathered their gear and lined up at the airlock. Each wore the standard blue uniform of Earth's United Defense Force. When the doors opened, they got their first real look at alien soldiers. 3 tall beings stood waiting, Two were crag warriors, 8 feet tall with thick, scaly skin that looked like natural armor. The third was blue-skinned and slender. "I am Officer Mock," said the blue alien in perfect English. "I will be your guide during your visit." The way Mock said visit made it clear he didn't expect them to stay long. The crag warriors made a sound like rocks grinding together. Han realized they were laughing. "These are the humans," one crag said, looking down at them. "They are so small and soft." Officer Mock led them through wide hallways filled with alien soldiers from at least a dozen different species. Some had 4 arms, others had eyes that went all the way around their heads. All of them stared at the humans. "The living areas for lesser competitors are this way," Mock said, leading them down a narrow side passage. "Lesser competitors?" Corporal Yoon asked quietly. Mock turned. "Yes, species like yours that lack natural advantages. Though I must say, none as limited as humans have tried before." Their quarters were small and basic. The beds were too large, the chairs too high, and the air smelled strange. "The first tests begin tomorrow at dawn," Mock said. "Try not to embarrass yourselves too badly." With that, he left them alone. Private Lee Sun, the tech expert, immediately began scanning the room. "They're watching us," he said, pointing to tiny devices in the corners. Captain Han wasn't surprised. "Let them watch. We have nothing to hide." Sergeant Kim opened her pack and pulled out a small projector. It showed layouts of the station they had studied on the trip. "They put us far from the training areas," she said, "and even further from the main competition zones." "Because they don't expect us to get that far," said Corporal Yoon bitterly. Captain Han looked at his team. He could see doubt starting to grow in their eyes. The reality of being surrounded by powerful alien warriors was sinking in. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "Yes, they are bigger. Yes, they are stronger. But they have never faced humans before. They think our size is our weakness," he continued. "But our strength has never been in our muscles. It's here." He tapped his head. "And here." He placed a hand over his heart. "Tomorrow, they expect us to fail the physical tests, to give up when things get hard, to prove that humans don't belong here." Han looked each team member in the eye. "Are we going to do what they expect?" "No, sir," they answered together. "Humanity didn't get to the stars by giving up when things got hard," Han said. "We got here by finding ways to overcome every challenge. Tomorrow, we show the galaxy what humans can do." As his team prepared their gear with new purpose, Han stood by the window looking out at the endless stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, a small blue planet that most aliens considered unimportant. After these tests, that would change. The training area was filled with alien warriors when Captain Han and his team arrived. Most were Krag or Vish, the 2 dominant species in the coalition. The Krag were tall with thick, armor-like skin. The Vish had 4 arms and moved like water flowing. Officer Mock waited for them with what seemed like a smile, though it was hard to tell with his blue face. "Today is the physical strength test," Mock said. "Very simple. Lift the weights, run the course, fight the combat bots." He pointed to giant metal weights at one station. "Krag warriors can lift these easily. I doubt humans can move them at all." Many alien warriors gathered to watch. They wanted to see the weak humans fail. "First up, lifting test," announced a voice over the speakers. Sergeant Kim stepped forward first. She looked at the massive weight, then walked around it slowly. The aliens laughed. "The small human is confused," shouted one Krag. But Kim wasn't confused. She was thinking. She spotted a metal bar lying nearby and picked it up. "What is she doing?" whispered the aliens. Kim slid the bar under the weight, found a small block, and placed it under the bar near the weight. Then she pushed down on the other end of the bar. Slowly, the massive weight lifted off the ground. "She's using simple leverage," explained Private Lee to his team. "Basic physics." The aliens fell silent. Kim hadn't lifted the weight with pure strength like a crag would. She had found another way. When it was Corporal Yoon's turn, he did something similar. And when Private Choi tried, she used a different technique, finding balance points in the weight that made it possible to tip and roll it. Officer Mok looked confused. This is unusual. Next, the endurance course, called the announcer. The course was a running track with higher gravity than Earth. It was meant to exhaust the humans quickly. Captain Han gathered his team. "We pace ourselves," he said. "Slow and steady. No racing." The aliens roared with laughter as the humans started jogging slowly. But their laughter died as the humans kept going, never stopping, moving at the same careful pace. When others tired, the humans were still moving. "They should be collapsed by now," muttered Mok. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters," explained Captain Han as he passed. "We can't run as fast as many animals, but we can run longer." The final test was combat against training robots. The robots were programmed to fight like coalition warriors. Direct, powerful attacks meant to overpower enemies quickly. "Humans are too fragile for this," warned Mok. "You should withdraw." "We'll manage," said Captain Han. When the first robot attacked Private Lee, he didn't try to block its powerful strike. Instead, he slipped aside and let the robot's momentum carry it forward. Then he struck at the joints, the weak points. Sergeant Kim fought with Captain Han against two robots. Instead of each fighting one, they worked together, one distracting while the other attacked from behind. Corporal Yoon used the terrain, climbing to higher ground to gain advantage. Private Choi used the robot's strength against it, redirecting its attacks rather than blocking them. None of the humans won easily. They were hit, knocked down, and bruised, but each completed their fight. When it was over, Officer Mok checked his data pad with wide eyes. "Well?" asked Captain Han, breathing hard. "None of you passed with high scores," Mok said slowly. "But none of you failed completely either." He looked troubled. "This has never happened before with a species of your physical limitations." A group of crag warriors watched from across the room, their expressions dark. One tall crag stepped forward. "They cheated," he growled. "Humans used tricks instead of strength." "No rules were broken," Mok replied. As they left the training area, Captain Han heard the aliens talking among themselves. They weren't laughing anymore. "Tomorrow will be harder," Mok warned. Captain Han smiled. "We're counting on it." "This is the survival test," Officer Mok explained as he led the human team to a large dome. "You will be placed in a harsh environment. Your goal is to reach the extraction point 30 kilometers away." Captain Han looked through the viewing window. Inside the dome was a barren landscape with red rocks and strange plants. A thin mist hung in the air. "The atmosphere is breathable, but contains irritants," Mok continued. "Most species find it uncomfortable. Crag warriors simply endure the pain. Vish can filter it with their special breathing organs." He looked at the humans with what seemed like pity. "You have Mather advantage." "What supplies do we get?" asked Sergeant Kim. Mok handed each of them a small pack. "Basic survival gear." "Not much." Private Choi looked inside her pack. A water container, a knife, some cord, and a simple map. She frowned. "No medical supplies." "Coalition warriors don't need such things," Mok said proudly. The team was led into a preparation room. Through a speaker, they heard the announcement. "Survival test begins in 5 minutes. All teams prepare for entry." Captain Han gathered his Marines close. "This test isn't just about physical strength. It's about smart thinking. Private Choi, you focus on dealing with the air problem. Private Lee, see what you can do with the communication device in your pack. Sergeant Kim and Corporal Yoon, we need to plan our route carefully." When the doors opened, the humans entered the dome. Immediately, they felt the air burn their throats and eyes. "It's like breathing pepper," coughed Corporal Yoon. Private Choi quickly examined the contents of her pack again. "I have an idea," she said. She took out her water container and the cloth it was wrapped in. We can make simple masks by soaking the cloth in water. Within minutes, each human had a damp cloth tied over their nose and mouth. Private Lee was studying the small communication device from his pack. This is meant for emergency signals only, but I can modify it, he said. He opened the back panel and began adjusting wires. There, now it can detect changes in the environment. It will warn us if the air gets worse or if there are dangerous areas ahead. They began walking, Captain Han in front, checking their direction with the map. Sergeant Kim took up the rear, watching for any movement behind them. Through viewing screens back at the Nexus, alien warriors watched the humans with interest. Several Krag teams had already started the test, charging ahead at full speed. Vish teams moved quickly too, using their 4 arms to climb over obstacles. The humans are moving too slow, one alien observer said. They will never finish in time. But Officer Mock was watching carefully. They are being methodical, he said. Hour after hour, the human team kept moving at a steady pace. When they found a stream, Private Choi collected water to refresh their masks. When the path became steep, they helped each other climb. They never stopped for long, never raced ahead, but kept moving consistently. Meanwhile, on the viewing screens, they could see other teams having problems. Some Krag warriors were slowing down, their energy spent from rushing at the beginning. The Vish team had taken a wrong turn and was now lost in a canyon. Our advantage isn't speed, Captain Han told his team as they took a short rest. It's smart pacing and working together. As night fell in the dome, most teams stopped to rest. But the humans kept going, using the stars projected on the dome's ceiling to navigate. Humans have good night vision compared to Krag, explained Private Lee. We should use that advantage. By morning, the alien observers were stunned. The human team had covered 2/3 of the distance, passing several alien teams who had started faster but couldn't maintain their pace. Impossible, muttered a Krag commander watching the screens. Their bodies are weak. How are they still moving? Officer Mock was silent, his eyes fixed on the screens as the humans worked together to cross a wide ravine. They don't give up, he said finally. And they work as one unit, not as individuals showing off their strength. As the second day began, the aliens watching the test weren't laughing anymore. They were learning something new about humans. They were tougher than they looked. The human team stood in a large room filled with tables. On each table sat strange metal boxes with colored wires sticking out. Officer Mock looked almost pleased as he explained the next test. These are bomb simulators, he said. Each one gets harder to disarm. This test usually favors the Vish, with their 4 arms and perfect memory. He handed each human a small toolkit. You have 30 minutes per device. Fail to disarm it, and you get a mild shock. Not enough to hurt. Much. Captain Han looked around. The room was filled with alien teams, mostly Vish. The 4-armed aliens moved with confidence, their multiple limbs working together as they practiced with the tools. Private Lee, Han said quietly, this is your area. The young tech specialist nodded. He wasn't as strong as Sergeant Kim or as good a shot as Corporal Yoon, but he understood machines. When the test began, each team approached their first device. Private Lee studied his carefully, not touching anything at first. Sir, these aren't like Earth bombs, he whispered to Captain Han. The logic is different. Figure it out, Han said. We'll help however we can. Private Lee looked at the colored wires, the strange symbols, and the blinking lights. Then he noticed something. The patterns, he said. They use base 6 math, not base 10 like we do. He turned to his team. I need paper. Choi quickly tore a page from her small notebook. Lee began writing symbols and numbers, working through the alien logic. Around them, Vish teams were already finishing their first devices. Hurry, urged Sergeant Kim. The others are ahead. Speed isn't everything, Lee replied, still writing. Understanding is better. He looked up suddenly. Got it. The sequence follows their mathematical system. See how this light blinks 6 times, then changes color. That's their version of carrying the one. With this insight, Lee carefully traced each wire, following the pattern. His hands weren't as fast as the Vish with their 4 arms, but his movements were precise. With 2 minutes left, he disconnected the final wire. The device powered down. "First device complete," said an automated voice. Officer Mock raised his eyebrows in surprise. As they moved to the second device, Captain Han had an idea. "We need to work as a team," he said. "Lee, you figure out the pattern. Tell us what to do, and we'll help with the physical work." The second device was more complex, with more wires and faster blinking lights. Lee studied it, then began giving orders. "Sergeant Kim, hold these 2 wires apart so I can see the connection behind them. Corporal Yoon, when I say now, press that blue button for exactly 3 seconds. Captain, I need you to count the blink pattern on that red light." Working together, they completed the second device with 5 minutes to spare. By the third device, they had a system. Lee would identify the pattern, and each team member would handle one part of the disarming process. While one Vish with 4 arms might work faster alone, 4 humans working in perfect coordination could match their speed. The aliens watched with growing interest. This was not what they expected. During the fourth device, one of the Krag teams deliberately bumped into their table, nearly causing Lee to cut the wrong wire. "Sorry, humans," said the Krag warrior with a smile that showed sharp teeth. "You're so small, I didn't see you." Sergeant Kim started to respond, but Captain Han stopped her. "Focus on the mission," he said quietly. Their fifth device was the hardest yet. Even Lee seemed puzzled by it. "The pattern keeps changing," he said, frustrated. "Look deeper," suggested Captain Han. "Maybe there's a pattern to the changes." Lee stared at the device, then suddenly laughed. "It's so simple. They're testing if we can adapt. The pattern shifts every 6 sequences, but the shift itself follows a larger pattern." Once he recognized this, Lee quickly worked out the solution. With his team's help, they disarmed the final device faster than most of the Vish teams. When the test ended, Officer Mock approached them with a new look in his eyes. Not quite respect, but no longer dismissal. "You completed all 5 devices," he said. "Only 3 Vish teams did better." He paused. "How did you overcome the limitation of having only 2 arms each?" Captain Han smiled. "We used 8 arms together. It's called teamwork." Mock tilted his head, considering this new idea. "Interesting. Most coalition warriors prefer to prove their individual strength." "On Earth," Han replied, "we learned long ago that together, we are stronger than alone." "This is the battle arena," Officer Mock explained as he led the human team into a massive room. The floor was covered with different terrains: rocky hills, small forests, open fields, and deep valleys. Each team must capture 5 flight points while defending against automated defense systems. Captain Han studied the arena. It was at least a kilometer across, with glowing markers showing the flight points they needed to capture. Krag teams usually charged straight through, using their armor to absorb damage. Mock continued. Vish teams used their speed to outrun the defenses. He looked at the humans with doubt. "You have neither option." "We'll find our own way," Captain Han said. Each team was given basic equipment: protective vests, communication devices, and stun weapons that shot harmless energy bolts to simulate real weapons. The automated defenses would fire similar stun bolts at the competitors. When the signal sounded, teams rushed into the arena. Krag warriors ran straight toward the nearest flight points, roaring battle cries. Vish teams split up, each member racing toward a different objective. Captain Han gathered his team behind a large rock. "We're not going to do what they expect," he said. "Sergeant Kim, what do you see?" Kim had been studying the arena carefully. "The defense systems are fixed in place. They can't move, only turn and fire. And they seem to target movement and heat." "Good. Then we use that against them, Han said. He pointed to a nearby forest area. We'll move through cover using the terrain for protection. Instead of splitting up or charging forward, the human team moved together, staying low and using rocks, trees, and valleys to hide from the defense systems. When they had to cross open ground, they created distractions. Yoon, see that rock over there? Han pointed. Hit it with a stun bolt. Corporal Yoon, their best shot, fired at the rock. The defense turret immediately turned and fired at the spot where the bolt hit. Now move while it's distracted, Han ordered. One by one, they crossed the open space while the turret fired at the false target. From the control room, alien observers watched with confusion. What are the humans doing? Asked a Krag commander. They're moving so slowly. They'll never finish in time. Officer Mok said nothing, but he watched with interest. As the simulation continued, something unexpected happened. A system malfunction caused one of the defense turrets to increase its power to dangerous levels. The safety protocols failed. A team of Krag warriors was crossing an open field when the turret fired. Instead of harmless stun bolts, it fired powerful energy blasts that knocked 2 Krag soldiers unconscious. Emergency in Sector 4, came the announcement. All teams avoid that area. But 3 more Krag warriors were already in the danger zone, pinned down by the malfunctioning turret. Captain Han and his team were nearby, hidden in a small valley. They heard the emergency call and saw the trapped Krag soldiers. We should keep going to the next flight point, suggested Private Lee. This is our chance to get ahead. Captain Han shook his head. No, we help them. Sir, they're the same Krag who tried to sabotage us earlier, Sergeant Kim pointed out. Doesn't matter, Han said firmly. On Earth, we don't leave anyone behind, not even our enemies. Han quickly made a plan. He sent Yoon to a high position to create a diversion with precise shots. Private Choi prepared emergency medical supplies. Then Han, Kim, and Lee rushed out to help the trapped Krag. Using their distraction techniques, they managed to draw the turret's fire while pulling the injured Krag to safety. Private Choi immediately began treating the wounded aliens. The lead Krag warrior looked at Captain Han with confusion. Why did you help us? We could have handled it ourselves. Maybe, Han replied. But now we don't have to find out. From the control room, Admiral Ko himself had arrived to observe the situation. He watched as the humans risked their own safety to rescue aliens who had shown them nothing but contempt. Interesting, he said quietly to Officer Mok. The humans value life over competition. A weakness, surely, replied another alien commander. Perhaps, said Admiral Ko. Or perhaps something we have forgotten in our focus on strength and victory. As the emergency was resolved and the simulation continued, word spread quickly about what the humans had done. Other alien teams began to look at them differently, not with respect yet, but with curiosity. And the human team continued their careful advance, capturing flag points one by one, using the terrain in ways the coalition warriors never considered. Captain Han and his team were led into a dark room. The walls glowed with strange symbols, and the air felt heavy. This is the mind test, Officer Mok explained. Your brains will be linked to our systems. You must complete mental tasks while the system tries to break your focus with unpleasant images. What kind of images? Asked Private Choi, sounding worried. Whatever your mind fears most, Mok replied. For Krag warriors, it's usually dishonor or failure. For Vish, it's being trapped or alone. He looked at the humans curiously. We don't know what humans fear most. This will be educational. Each team member was directed to a separate chair. As they sat down, metal bands wrapped around their foreheads. Begin, said a voice from everywhere and nowhere. Instantly, each human was alone in their own mind. Private Choi found herself staring at Earth from space. At first, it was beautiful. Then missiles began to fly. Nuclear explosions bloomed across the planet's surface. She heard screams. billions of human voices crying out at once. "This isn't real," she whispered to herself. "It's just a test." But her hands shook, and tears ran down her face. Sergeant Kim saw her family captured by alien soldiers, being taken away in chains while she stood helpless. Corporal Yoon saw himself failing over and over, missing shots that cost his teammates their lives. Private Lee saw technology he couldn't understand, problems he couldn't solve. Captain Han saw all his team dead around him, Earth surrendering to alien forces because he had failed this test. The visions were overwhelming. Each person had to fight through their deepest fears while trying to solve complex puzzles that appeared in their minds. In the control room, alien observers watched the humans' vital signs spike dangerously. "Their emotional responses are much stronger than we expected," one alien scientist noted. "Their brains process fear differently than ours." Admiral Ko watched with interest. "Are their minds breaking?" "Not yet," the scientist replied, sounding surprised. "They continue to work on the puzzles despite extreme stress levels." Inside the test, Captain Han fought against the crushing weight of the visions. Then he remembered his training. On Earth, human soldiers learned mental techniques to resist torture and fear. He began to breathe slowly and deeply. "Focus on now," he told himself. "These are not real. Find your center." The meditation technique began to work. The visions didn't disappear, but they lost some of their power over him. Captain Han focused on the puzzle before him, a complex pattern recognition task. As his mind cleared, he began to solve it piece by piece. Across the room, Private Choi was struggling. Her vision of Earth's destruction kept growing worse. Then, suddenly, she heard Captain Han's voice in her mind. "Remember your training, Choi. Breathe. Center yourself." The mental link that connected them to the test also connected them to each other. Captain Han had found a way to reach his team. One by one, he helped them fight through their fears. "Kim, focus on your breathing. Yoon, remember why we're here. Lee, trust your knowledge." Together, they pushed back against the visions and concentrated on their tasks. In the control room, the aliens watched in amazement. "Impossible," muttered the scientist. "They're communicating somehow, and their fear responses are decreasing." Admiral Ko leaned forward. "How are their puzzle scores?" "Rising rapidly," the scientist replied. "The human female, Choi, has nearly completed the 3rd level. The leader, Han, is already on level 5. As the test continued, the humans discovered something strange. Their emotional nature, which the aliens saw as a weakness, gave them an unexpected advantage. The test created fear to break concentration, but humans were used to feeling strong emotions and working through them. "Emotions are part of being human," Captain Han told his team through their mental link. "We don't need to block them out completely. We just need to control them." When the test finally ended, the humans were exhausted but triumphant. They had all completed at least 4 levels of puzzles. Officer Mock looked at them with new respect. "Your scores are unexpected. Only one team did better." "Which team?" asked Captain Han. "Admiral Ko's personal guard," Mock replied. "The best warriors in the coalition." As they left the testing room, Admiral Ko himself was waiting. The tall blue alien looked at each human carefully. "Your species feels fear more deeply than ours," he said, "yet you continue to function. Interesting." He turned to leave, then paused. "Tomorrow is the final test. It will be challenging." Captain Han smiled slightly. "We're counting on it." "The final test is simple," Admiral Ko announced to the remaining teams. "Each team must defend their fortress while capturing the others." The massive simulation room had been transformed. 3 fortress structures stood in a triangle, each on raised ground. Between them lay open areas, forests, and rocky terrain. "Blue Fortress belongs to the Krag team," Admiral Ko continued. "Green to the Vish, and red," he looked at the humans, "to the Earth team." Captain Han studied the layout. The human fortress was smaller than the others and had less cover around it. Each fortress has a core, Admiral Ko explained. Protect yours. Capture the others. That is all. With that, he left the room. As the teams prepared, Officer Mock approached the humans. I must tell you something, he said quietly. The other teams have made an agreement. They will both attack you first, then fight each other. Why are you telling us this? Asked Sergeant Kim. Mock looked uncomfortable. Because it is not fair. And you have earned better. Captain Han nodded. Thank you. Inside their fortress, Han gathered his team. We can't win by playing their game. The Krag are stronger, the Vish are faster. So we changed the rules. How? Asked Private Lee. We won't defend in place. We'll create a mobile defense, and we won't attack directly. We'll make them fight each other. Han quickly outlined his plan. Instead of staying in their fortress, they would set traps and create false targets. Only one person would guard their core at any time, while the others would move around the battlefield. When the signal sounded, the Krag and Vish warriors charged toward the human fortress as expected. They didn't even attack each other when their paths crossed. But when they reached the human fortress, they found it nearly empty. Just Private Choi inside, with the core apparently unguarded. It's a trap, said the Krag leader, stopping suddenly. The humans are planning something. The Vish leader hissed. They're trying to trick us. Spread out and find them. As the alien warriors searched the fortress, they triggered the traps set by Private Lee, harmless but confusing smoke bombs, noisemakers, and tripwires. Meanwhile, Captain Han and Corporal Yoon had circled around and reached the edge of the Vish fortress. Using the skills they had shown in earlier tests, they moved silently, using cover and distractions. Sergeant Kim and Private Lee approached the Krag fortress from another direction. Kim carried a device Lee had made from parts in their equipment. It's creating a heat signature like a human body, Lee explained. The sensors will think we're approaching from the south. Inside the Vish fortress, most warriors had left to attack the humans. Only 3 remained to guard their core. Captain Han watched them from hiding. We can't fight them directly, he whispered to Yoon. But we don't need to. Han fired a stun bolt at a point far from where they were hiding. When the Vish guards moved to investigate, Yoon fired at a different spot. Confused, the guards split up. With quick, silent movements, Han slipped into the core room and placed a small device on the Vish core. It wasn't a weapon. It was a transmitter. Lee, do you read me? Han whispered into his communicator. Loud and clear came the reply from across the battlefield. I have the signal. Activating now. The device on the Vish core began to pulse. It sent a signal that mimicked Krag weapons fire. At the same time, Kim and Lee had placed a similar device on a Krag core. This one mimicked Vish energy signatures. When the monitors in each fortress showed apparent attacks from their rivals, the alien warriors reacted exactly as the humans hoped. The Krag team rushed back to defend against what they thought was a Vish attack. The Vish hurried to counter a supposed Krag assault. In the control room, alien observers watched in confusion. What's happening? One asked. The Krag and Vish are fighting each other, but the humans are nowhere to be seen. As the alien teams clashed, Han's team regrouped near their own fortress. Phase 2, Han ordered. While the aliens were distracted fighting each other, the human team split into 2 groups. Han and Choi headed for the Vish core, now barely guarded. Kim, Lee, and Yoon targeted the Krag fortress. Using all the skills they had demonstrated throughout the tests, teamwork, distraction, clever use of terrain, they slipped into both fortresses almost unseen. In the final minutes of the test, alarms blared in both alien fortresses as their cores were captured. The confusion on the battlefield was complete. When Admiral Ko announced the end of the test, everyone froze in disbelief. The scoreboard showed a clear human victory. The Krag leader stomped forward. Impossible. They must have cheated. Admiral Ko looked at Captain Han. Explain your strategy, human. Han stood straight and proud. We used our enemies' expectations against them. They thought we would fight like them. We didn't. For the first time, Admiral Ko's face showed what might have been a smile. Captain Han and his team stood at attention in the Grand Hall of the Nexus. Every important alien commander and official had gathered to witness something unprecedented. The completion ceremony for the first lesser species to pass the Coalition military trials. Admiral Ko stood on a raised platform, his blue skin almost glowing under the bright lights. His face was unreadable as he addressed the crowd. The trials are designed to test the limits of warriors, he said. Strength, speed, endurance, technical skill, mental fortitude, and tactical ability. The human team has completed all tests with scores sufficient to qualify. A murmur ran through the crowd. Many crag warriors growled softly in disagreement. I object, shouted the crag commander, stepping forward. They didn't win through proper warrior methods. They used tricks and deception. Admiral Ko looked at the crag with cold eyes. The purpose of the trials is not to show off strength, Commander. It is to determine who would survive and succeed in real combat. He turned to look at the humans. And in real combat, victory is what matters, not the path taken. Officer Mok stepped forward with 5 silver badges. These are the marks of qualified coalition warriors. He explained as he handed them to Captain Han, the first ever given to humans. As Han distributed the badges to his team, Mok leaned closer and spoke quietly. There is something you should know. The tests were made harder for your team. What do you mean? Han asked. The gravity was set higher than normal during the physical tests. The irritants in the survival dome were increased. The mind game was set to maximum intensity. Mok looked almost embarrassed. Some on the council wanted to ensure you would fail. Han looked at his team with new pride. They had overcome even more than they realized. Admiral Ko called for silence. The council will now vote on the status of Earth within the coalition. The human team waited as the alien leaders discussed in their own languages. Finally, Admiral Ko turned to them again. Captain Han Tai, the council has a proposition. We offer positions in our elite forces to you and your team. Your unique approach could be valuable. The offer was unexpected. To serve with the most powerful military force in the galaxy was an honor beyond imagination. Han looked at his team. They all had the same expression, pride in what they had accomplished, but also something else, a longing for home. With respect, Admiral, Han replied, our place is on Earth. Our mission was to prove that humans belong in the galaxy as equals, not as servants. We have families and a planet waiting for us. Admiral Ko nodded slowly. I suspected that would be your answer. Instead, the Council offers Earth full membership in the Galactic Coalition, with all rights and protections. The fastest ascension of any species in our history. The hall erupted in surprised voices. Even Officer Mok looked shocked. Later, as the human team prepared to board their ship for the journey home, Admiral Ko requested a private word with Captain Han. There is something you should know, the Admiral said when they were alone. The true purpose of inviting humans to these trials was to assess whether your species needed to be contained. Contained? Han asked, though he understood the meaning. Yes, some believe humans were developing too quickly, spreading too fast among the stars. They feared what would happen when you became a true spacefaring race. Admiral Ko's eyes studied Han carefully. I was among those with concerns. And now? Han asked. Now I believe the galaxy will be more interesting with humans in it. The Admiral extended his hand in the human gesture of respect he had learned. Your people think differently. That can be valuable. As their ship departed the Nexus, Captain Han looked at his team with pride. Private Choi was already sending messages to Earth about medical techniques she had learned. Private Lee was studying the alien technology they had been gifted. Sergeant Kim and Corporal Yoon were planning training programs for the next generation of human space marines. General Park will be pleased, Sergeant Kim said, looking at the formal agreement in Han's hands. Captain Han nodded. This is just the beginning. Humanity has earned its place among the stars. As Earth came into view, blue and beautiful against the blackness of space, Han thought about what Admiral Ko had said. The aliens had feared humans because they were different. Now they were beginning to see that those differences could be strengths. Send a message to General Park, Han told privately. Tell her, mission accomplished. Humanity has arrived on the galactic stage. They're not ready for what comes next.